Hey, how you doing, students? How you doing? This is Jacob Clifford. You know me. Thank you so much for watching my videos. Today is going to be awesome. We're doing economics case studies. I'm going to jump straight into it. If you didn't already do so, you got to do it right now. Make sure to download the worksheet we're going to be filling out and working on. First thing I want to do is thank you so much for watching all my YouTube videos. I hope that you and your family are safe during these tough times. I'm making videos to help you out. So if you take a look at the calendar, you can download it in the link below. I'm making videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Do me a favor really quickly to make sure everything's working. Let me know in the comment section. First of all, like the video and subscribe. Let's do that. And then let me know if my audio is working or if there's some issues with the audio. I'll check to make sure everything's fine. Anyway, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm making videos for you. On Monday, I'm doing microeconomics. Wednesday is macroeconomics. And today, Friday, is my favorite part, let's be honest. It's the case studies. It's the practical application of all these concepts that you're trying to learn in your classroom. All right, so here we go. First thing I want to do is double check to make sure you guys can hear me just fine. Then we'll jump straight into everything. Like I said, I hope that you guys are safe and you're doing okay. This is obviously tough times. I'm just reading some of you guys are saying, good. So it sounds like the audio is good. That's awesome. Okay. So now that's all set. Let's jump straight into what we're going to be doing today. Let's start off by, okay, let's back up. Let's back up. If you already went to, if you saw my supply and demand video that I did for Unit 2 on Monday, you'd see we did all this kind of stuff that was right here. We did all this supply and demand practice, consumer and producer surplus. And this is your traditional economics course kind of stuff. This is what you learn in college and AP and even an MBA program. These are the things that you learn about supply and demand. But all this stuff is not, I don't want to say not real, but it's not as practical as it doesn't explain why you're in the class. Yeah, I can draw consumer surplus, but that doesn't help you make better decisions in life. Like today, we're going to talk about like making better decisions. The reason why you're in an econ class. Yes, it's to learn this stuff and to understand this academic ideas of this stuff. But the real reason you're in this class is to be a better decision maker and basically, to make your life better. So going to that idea, I make econ videos, as you know. The video below me, if you haven't seen it, was a video I made using Indiana Jones and supply and demand. It's hilarious and it's awesome and it connects these concepts. But I want you to understand that there's kind of different realms of understanding economics. The video below me, that's kind of like, oh wow, economics is in other things. Like you start seeing when you study economics, you realize it's in other things. You see it all over the place. Like, oh, that's economics. Oh, that's economics, right? So you go to the store, let's say you go to, I don't know, McDonald's, and you see that, a large drink is $1.89, but, an extra large drink is only 10 cents more. Like, what's only 10 or 20 cents more? That's the law of diminishing marginal utility. And if you didn't take economics, maybe you wouldn't have known that, right? So you see economics everywhere. So that video below me is an example of that idea. The papers I just showed you, this is the academic side of economics. What I'm about to talk about for a second here is the other side of economics, which is the application side of economics. So what do I mean by that? Well, let me tell you a quick story about my house. So I purchased a home back in 2016, and because I understand supply and demand, and I'm not the best business person. I'm not the best negotiator, but I understand supply and demand. It gets it for me. So long story short, I was looking at a couple of houses. We weren't ready to move. We were still living in Canada. That's another story another time. And we're moving back to San Diego. We're only for Canada for a year, and we're thinking about buying a house. And so I see one online, and I notice it's been online for, the house hadn't sold for like 3 or 4 months. And I figured somebody would purchase it, but I came back later on and realized, oh, no one's bought this yet. And then I called the realtor. And one day when I called the realtor, I told him what house I was interested in. She said, that house? And I was like, wait a second, something's going on with this house. It's either a dump or something's wrong with it. And I realized that for some reason, it was clear that she wasn't getting very many people interested in this house that we were interested in looking at. The thing was, it was a good house. It looked online at least, because I was in Canada. I bought a house online, which is pretty weird. I look at it, and I'm looking at this house and it looks great. And I'm wondering why is it that no one wants to buy it? First of all, their price when they started was just way too high. I think when they started, it was way too. I'll just tell you. You can look online. It was 1.2 million. Now I'm not super rich. I live in San Diego, and so don't think that that's a thing. It's just San Diego prices. So they put it at for 1.2. It was not worth 1.2. I don't think. But I realized that no one was buying it. They were lowering the price, and no one was still buying it. That's the idea of law of demand, right? No one's buying. Quantity demanded is low. Lower the price, more people will buy. By the way, we're going to get to the worksheet. If you're wondering about the worksheet, we're going to get to it. I got a point here. So anyways, the lady, I can tell in her voice. And then when I started looking at the pictures, I realized the problem with the house was this. This is our backyard right here. The backyard of the house faced a pool. And that's a problem because any one of these doors would lead, basically there's like 7 doors that go straight to the backyard that would go straight to the pool. So any family that has young children that don't swim does not want this house. So it had limited demand. And there's another reason is any family that's older, like an old person wouldn't want our house because it's got different levels. And so there's, 6 stairs here, 6 stairs here, 6 stairs over here. So it's kind of a 3-tiered house, but it's not like giant stairs, but it's annoying enough that if you're old, going up and down those stairs would be annoying. So there is obviously limited demand. And I can just tell by the way she was talking. Then I found out that the people who once lived there had moved about 4 years ago, and then we're renting it out. And I also knew because of that if you own a home for a certain amount of time and then you move out, you have 5 years to sell it and not pay capital gains if you move back in. So there's all this, there's some tax information as well to figure out, okay, the sellers wanted to sell. Like the sellers wanted to sell because they didn't want to pay extra taxes. No one really particularly wanted to buy it because they were worried about, the children getting, hurt in that pool. And it was perfect for us. All of my kids our youngest daughter was just starting to swim, so we're okay with that. We're not old. We're kind of in the middle. This house worked for us. The point was that knowing supply and demand, understanding, okay, what is going on here? Help me make a better decision. I ended up getting it for $900,000, which I felt was a smoking great deal at the time. To you, you're probably like $900,000 for a house. Trust me, again, it's weird because of San Diego market prices, which is all economics in the first place, which is what I'm trying to teach you. That's my point. Okay, all that said, you've downloaded the worksheet. I want you to see that economics is everywhere and you're totally going to be using it. Like you're going to be using this stuff. Someday when you've got a job and you're trying to, decide if you want to move on to another company before you ever move on. Right? So this is a trick for negotiation. Before you say no to anything, why not ask? Like, so if you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to go get another, I don't like my job, I'm going to get another job. Go get another job. When you have that other job, before you leave, go to your boss and say, listen, hey, I'm going to go get another job. What can you do for me? You know what I'm saying? If they value your work, maybe they'll increase your price. Maybe that price, the wage, will go high enough to make it worthwhile to cover your opportunity costs to not go get the other job. So anytime, you have an offer, you got to be thinking about supply and demand, and you got to be thinking, okay, where am I valuable? If I'm valuable, the companies going to want to keep me. Anyways, that's just a quick example from my life of why I'm learning this stuff and why I want to learn this stuff and why you want to learn this stuff. So let's make up these examples. These case studies are kind of like made up scenarios, but they're using real life situations. And so I actually gave you the article that goes along with this one too. I made some adjustments to it a little bit, so I made it a little shorter. For teachers, if you can assign this to your students, by the way, if you're a teacher, real quick, I have a boatload of case studies. There's a link in the very bottom. This is only a few of them. You can use this with this year's students. Listen to my words, this year's students, because of this COVID-19 thing, but please don't use this with next year's students and future year students. This is one of the products that I sell, and I do this to help students learn. So if this is helpful for you, awesome. Please consider getting all the case studies on my website. All right, that said, let's jump into it. Okay, case study number 1, read the scenario and answer the questions given the following information. Here is the scenario. Due to a global COVID-19 pandemic, you and your family have been quarantined for almost 3 weeks. This morning, you got a call from a former boss. He asked you if you'd be willing to come back to work as a delivery driver for his dairy farm. He seemed pretty desperate and even asked you if you were available to work as soon as this afternoon. That's, if someone called you, hey, can you work today? I know you used to work here during the summer, but can you work today? You wonder what's going on in the milk market, and you find this article, U.S. dairy farmers dump milk as pandemic upends food markets. Okay, so something's going on in the milk industry. Something is happening, and this is real. Something is happening, and there's an article that talks about it. This is April 7th, 2020, talking about what's going on in the milk market. Now, if you remember the last case study that I did, we talked about toilet paper at that time. We also talked about the idea that not all companies are worse off because of COVID-19. Some are actually doing better off. Some industries are doing good. Some industries are doing poorly. And that's what we talked about in the last case study. You want to go watch that last case study because it was interesting stuff. We also found out why toilet paper is actually not being hoarded. If you watch that video, go watch that video. It's actually kind of super interesting. Let's talk about this, though. We're talking about milk. The reason why I chose milk is because right there, you see it? Right there, milk. If my most famous video on YouTube, not famous, but my most watched video on YouTube is one where I drink the gallon of milk talking about demand, which is appropriate. We're talking about supply and demand, and here we are analyzing milk. The world all comes together. It's beautiful. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start reading the article. The questions are right here. So why? So let's look at the first 5 of them, and think of those as you're reading, going through the article. Why are dairy farmers more affected by supply chain problems than other farmers? So like meat farmers or wheat farmers or corn farmers, they're not affected as much as dairy farmers. You could probably figure that out. If you think about it long enough, be like, yeah, the product of dairy is different. What is the difference between retail market and wholesale market? Did the demand for milk in the wholesale market increase, decrease as a result of COVID-19 pandemic? Did the demand in the retail, this is actually important. This one's talking about wholesale. This one's talking about retail demand. Did the demand increase or decrease? And over here, did the supply of milk in the retail market? Notice this one's supply, this one's demand. So demand of retail milk, supply of retail milk, and the demand of wholesale milk. What's going to happen with all those? Again, because if you've never heard of this, economics is the painful elaboration of the obvious. Some of you don't need economics like a class because you already know what's going on. You can already guess, okay, because of this, and here's COVID-19, I bet you this is what's happening in the wholesale market. But really, the reason why you're looking at economics is to hone in on your intuition of how intuitive econ is, and like, okay, now I know. I can even draw it on a graph and explain what's going on with supply and demand. All right, so those are some of the questions we're going to look at. So let's read a little bit, and I'll underline some things as we go. Jump on board with me, highlight some things. Okay, quote, "We need you to start dumping your milk," end quote, said his contact from the Dairy Farmers Association, the largest U.S. dairy cooperative. By the way, I don't talk about this much, but a cooperative is when a bunch of small companies, usually in a perfectly competitive industry that don't have any incentive to advertise on their own, all kind of get together and they kind of form like a group to help them. So not any one dairy farm would have a hard time, making contracts with big companies, but if they all got together with other dairy farms because the product is exactly the same, this is all economics. Despite strong demand for basic foods like dairy products amid the coronavirus pandemic, the milk supply chain has seen a host of disruptions. So the supply chain has some disruptions that are preventing dairy farmers from getting their products to the market. Ooh, interesting. So it's not necessarily that people are buying, tons more milk, even though that might be happening. What's going on over here is something with the supply chain, right? So some sort of disruption is preventing dairy farmers from getting their milk to the market. Mass closures of restaurants and schools have forced sudden shift from the wholesale food service market to retail grocery stores, creating logistic and packaging nightmares for plant processing, milk, butter, and cheese. Trucking companies that haul dairy products are scrambling to get enough drivers, as some of them who fear the virus have stopped working. And sales to major dairy export markets have dried up as the food service sector largely shuts down globally. All right, so this talking about international trade right here. There's no international demand for milk because food sector markets closing. The dairy industry woes signal broader problems in the global food chain. According to farmers, agriculture economists, and food distributors, the dairy business got hit harder earlier than other agricultural commodities because the products are highly perishable. Found an answer. Highly perishable. Milk can't be frozen like meat or stuck in a silo like grain. Oh, you can't see that, but there it is. Let's go back to our answers. Here we go. Now I'm going to write super shorthand and quick here, so don't copy what I'm writing. I have horrible handwriting. But first question, why are dairy farmers more affected by supply chain? So if you were a dairy farmer, right? Now in this case, you're not. In this case, you're just somebody who's trying to help out a guy and maybe work for him or not work for him. But if you were a dairy farmer, you got to know, and you would know, that your product is different than the farmer down the street who's selling pork, right? So this one is because it said highly perishable. So I'm just writing totally... So you have to write something in your answer here about it's perishable and milk can't be frozen, like other things. So, or put into a silo. So you want to put something like that on there. I actually have the answers written out for you, and I'll refer to them from time to time so it's easier so you can see actually what I wrote. So there it is. I actually yanked the quote straight from the actual milk can't be frozen like meat or stuck in a silo like grain. I actually took the quote straight from that. All right, what's the difference between the retail market and the wholesale market? This is important because when we talk about the supply and demand, it's important to recognize that, which market are you looking at, right? So I remember specifically, let me tell you an example of this. I remember talking to my students about an oligopoly when there's only very few firms that are producing a product. And I said, okay, what are cars in? What's cars? And I was trying to simplify things. I was talking about the car production. So it's an oligopoly. There's relatively few car producers. It's very hard to jump into that market. That's a great example of an oligopoly. But then one of my students goes, no, that's not oligopoly. That's like a competitive market. There's a, and he started saying there's a car store, car dealership on this street, and then there's a used car sales over here on this street. And he's like naming our town and go, okay, there's a used car place here, there's a used car place here, and he's naming all these different used car companies. And he was talking about a different market. So when we analyze supply and demand, it's important to, okay, what market are we looking at? And you can see there's two different markets we're looking at here, retail and wholesale. So retail is something for the end user. So you bought something straight from the company. It's designed for you. You're the final person it was made for. It's for the end user. Wholesale is not for the end user. This is for businesses that turn around and sell whatever product this is. So the wholesale market, they're selling milk to a bakery that uses it in their baked goods, or they're selling milk to a restaurant who turns around and uses it to produce soup and whatever else they use milk for to make something. And so a wholesale market is basically selling it to other businesses. In fact, what I wrote right here in your answers is right here. Retail market is where goods and services are sold directly to end users. Wholesale market is where goods and services are sold to businesses, and not the end user. Okay, if that makes sense. Did the demand for milk in the wholesale market increase or decrease as a result of COVID-19? What do you think? Do you think demand increased or decreased in that wholesale market? The answer is demand decreased. No doubt about it. And it actually says this in the article. It's talking about this idea several different places. Sudden shift in the wholesale food market to retail grocery stores. In other words, mass closures of restaurants and schools. So think of all the schools that buy milk, right? Think of all the restaurants that buy milk. All that demand has decreased because those restaurants have shut down. And so the demand has gone down. And ask why, and you actually write that out, because fewer restaurants and universities and schools and all that stuff. So for me right here, I wrote you right here. Demand in the retail market, demand in the wholesale market has decreased because of mass closures of restaurants and schools. The article said food service sector has largely shut down globally. Okay, next one. How about demand for milk in the retail market? Okay, what's going on there? Well, demand has definitely increased. No doubt about it. The demand is, in fact, it talks about it later on. It gives you some actual numbers about this, how much more milk people are actually buying. And for this one, I wrote, the demand for the retail market has increased. People are eating home more often and not at restaurants. And it also says high demand as consumers stay at home during this pandemic. It actually says that later on. Again, you'd explain this, so don't turn this into your teacher if they're assigning this for homework with just a D down. Make sure to explain why for those. I'm just going quick. So here we go. Did the supply of milk in the retail market increase or decrease as a result of the pandemic? What do you think? How about the supply? We know people are buying more milk because they're eating more at home. They're not going out to restaurants. How about supply? Well, the supply definitely fell. And that's what this whole article is talking about. It's talking about the supply chain disruptions that are taking place. There is milk being produced, but they can't get it to the market. As you're going to find out later on, it talks a little bit later about specifics about that. So supply has fallen out. Their firms, businesses, I'll write businesses, can't get milk to the market, which is exactly, forgive my horrible handwriting. Okay, so I write like a doctor, but I don't have the same amount of income as a doctor. That's what's on in the scenario above. Remember, this guy who has the dairy farm, he's looking for delivery drivers because that's the problem. So you can talk about there's a shortage of delivery drivers. You can talk about the fact that all that is all leading to the idea that milk can't get to the market. There's some sort of supply chain disruption. You'd write that in your answers. Okay, according to this article, what happened to the price of milk? Oh, we got to keep reading. So let's keep going. Other food sectors, however, are seeing disruptions worldwide as travel restrictions are limiting workforce's need to plant, harvest, and distribute fruit and vegetables. So this is talking about other goods and services. And a shortage of refrigerated containers and truck drivers have slowed the shipment of staples such as meat, grains, and some other places. We've got a shortage of refrigerator containers and trucks and truck drivers. Oh, that's going to be a problem for all of us. This gentleman, this guy who got the phone call, could likely sell his milk if he could get it to the market. Dairy products in grocery stores have been in high demand, and consumers stay home for the pandemic. We mentioned that earlier. Though pandemic buying may be slowing. Earlier this week, a local market told his wife she could buy only 2 dairy products total for her shopping trip, as retailers nationwide ration many high-demand products. So this is kind of like the downside. The demand has gone up. People want to buy it, but because these farmers can't get it to market, then they're going to have to ration the goods. It's just gut-wrenching, said Leland. He stood inside his barn with cows lowing softly as animals were giving milk that would be funneled directly to the manure pit. All I can see is the line going down the drain. Leland has dumped more than 4,700 gallons of milk from his 480 cows each day since last week. The members of the DFA told Reuters it has asked some of his farmers in the cooperative to do the same, but not say how many. So some people, the cooperative is saying, listen, just chuck your milk away. We can't get it out. We can't sell your milk. We can't get it to market. All right, this is the part I really want you to pay attention to. The dumping comes even as consumer demand for dairy has soared. We already established that. Panic buying has left grocery stores' shelves nearly empty in recent weeks amid business shutdowns and quarantine nationwide. Retail purchaser of milk rose 53%. Okay, now we can put some numbers to this. So retail purchases have increased 50% this week, while butter sales surged 127%. Cheeses rose 84% compared to the same price in previous years. Grocers have charged higher prices too. So groceries have charged consumers more too. The average retail price of cow's milk is up 11%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a boatload. For the week ended March 21st compared to earlier years. Now, I'm going to keep reading and then we'll answer the questions. Finding enough truck drivers is part of the challenge. Agriculture groups have lobbied states to increase truck weight limits on highways and enable more food to be delivered. And then Dean Foods, which has been starting some plant shifts earlier and running them later, is offering a $1,000 sign-up bonus for drivers with dairy experience as struggling to fill 74 opening positions. So they're offering people $1,000 to go work at a delivery driver for a milk company or to work at the factory. Okay, here we go. According to this article, what has happened to the price of milk in the retail market? It said the price increased. How much did it increase again? Well, it said right here 11%. Now, and then the question says, do you think that will help reduce the current shortage? That one's up to you. Probably not, though. If the supply is going to remain low, if they can't get their products to the market, then it doesn't matter if the price goes up. Usually when the price goes up, that gives producers an incentive to produce more. But it's not the production that's affecting, it's the transportation that's affecting the supply of milk in this case, getting the milk to the actual market. So I'm not going to bother writing that one out. What I do want to do right now is this. So I'm going to go to the back of this one. I want to draw this out. Now I know I mentioned earlier that we're talking about the practical application of stuff, but at the same time, you got to pass your class. Let's talk about what's going on in milk in the retail market. You should understand the idea of demand, downward sloping curve. You should understand supply, upward sloping curve, and you get the idea of price at equilibrium and the quantity at equilibrium. You know this stuff, and it's easy. I hope you feel comfortable with supply and demand. Everything that's going on can be explained using graphs. That's the idea. It's like, geographers use maps, and, we like to use charts to explain things. Economists love graphs. Graphs really explain what's going on, and the graph, can help you understand what's going to happen. We already know for milk, for the retail market, the demand has gone up. People are at home, people want to buy more milk. Clearly, that's what's happening. So no doubt about it, and the price and the quantity are going to reflect this, but it's not just demand going up. At the same time, the supply has also decreased. So demand is increased, and producers are producing less milk. They're actually producing the same amount of milk, but they're not getting it to the market. So the milk in the retail market is not getting there, and we're ending up with some price that's way up here, which we already said is 11% higher, right? And it also says in the article, which is on the other side, the quantity has increased 53%, right? So 53% increase in the quantity. Now, that point is, when you read the article and it says, oh, price went up and quantity went up, you can actually draw a graph that explains exactly why that's happening. This is why you learn supply and demand in your class. This is a double shift, right? Two things are shifting at the same time. Now, in a class, most of the time, your teacher will ask you one or the other. So yes, if you're trying to pass a test, I'm kind of going beyond that test here. You increase in demand or a decrease in supply, but you understand that markets can shift, both things can shift, and that's exactly what's going on right now. So when you go to the market and you find out, whoa, what's going on with this milk? Right now, normally in a situation when there's a shortage, I'm going to redraw something, show you something else real quick, how markets work. Here's demand, here's supply. Normally, let's just do it with one shift. You can't see. Here's the original price, equilibrium. Let's say demand goes up and it's here. I'll draw all the way over. So when demand is here, what usually happens when demand goes up is this is the quantity supplied, right? This is how much producers are producing, when the demand first shifts. And this over here is how much people want. This is the quantity demanded, all right, quantity over here. So when the demand shifts to the right, then we end up with this shortage. Now I want you to imagine this demand curve disappearing. So just take the demand curve out of your head, because this is not where the demand is anymore, right? Demand has shifted. People want more of this. When the demand shifts over to the right, what happens is there's all these people who want to buy it, and all these producers are like, well, we're still producing what we used to produce before. And what happens is that causes these consumers who want it to start bidding up the price. Like, I want milk. I'll pay a little bit more. I'll pay a little bit more. All the people who want something start bidding up the price. That leads the price to a new equilibrium. So normally in a regular market, this is exactly what happens. And that higher price gets rid of the shortage, right? As the price goes up, people who didn't really even want the milk or want it the least or can't pay for it leave the market. They're like, yeah, I'm not going to buy it. So these people all leave. This means more producers produce more, right? The supply curve means at a higher price, when the price starts going up and people start offering higher prices for milk, producers of milk are like, okay, and milk comes from other areas. So let's say milk is being sold internationally and you find out price domestically has gone up. Like, okay, I'm going to start obviously going to the domestic market. And so milk comes in from other areas. And as the milk comes in, we get to a new price in equilibrium. Here's the new price P1 and a new equilibrium Q1. And the shortage, poof, disappears. That's how markets are supposed to work. And that's how markets do work, right? So whenever there's a shortage of something, like, oh, there's a shortage, the shortage shouldn't last for very long unless something weird is happening in the market. And the same thing is happening here. Something weird is happening in this market. That's why there's still a shortage, right? It's producers want to produce more milk. Now, the reality is the shortage won't last long because, as you found out at the end of the article, we're probably going to get some more truck drivers. We'll probably, I'm not sure if they can find more trucks that are refrigerated, but maybe they'll come in from other sectors. So maybe, other people who are using trucks, or maybe someone's going to develop, stick a big fat air conditioner on the end of on a truck and make it a refrigerated truck. Do you know what I'm saying? And put it, if at the right price, I would go buy a truck for me. And I'm not even a shipper of this stuff. At the right price, I would go buy a truck, right? Or go rent one from U-Haul, cut out the top, stick a generator on the roof, put a giant air conditioner on the roof, and make a refrigerator truck. I'd start that process right now if I was motivated at the right price. You pay me a couple $1 million, yeah, I'll go do that and then return the U-Haul truck with a giant hole on the top. But you get the idea. You understand what I'm saying is this creates an incentive for producers to start doing more stuff. When the price goes up, that's actually a good thing because you're going to get more of the thing that's being produced. All right, I'm kind of going on a side note here, and I'm sorry. Let's go back to this scenario and let's answer some of these questions. How has coronavirus affected supply for truck drivers? The supply has decreased. Why? Why has supply decreased? Supply, now, by the way, I should mention this. A supply decrease is a shift to the left. Remember, shift to the left. Don't ever think of supply, when you see this, supply decreased, right? Don't think supply decreased. Don't draw it that way. That's more of a bookwork sort of thing. But how coronavirus affects supply of truckers? It decreased specifically in the article. It said it right here because some drivers who fear the virus stop working. Right? So some people stop working. So I'm just going to write fear, and you can fill out the rest of it right there. But some people are like, you know what? I'm not going to work as a truck driver, or they feel like they have health concerns and like, I'm not going to go work. Other than wage, what are 2 other factors that would influence your decision to go back to work as a delivery driver? All right, here we go. Other than the wage. So if your first thing is, well, okay, how much is this guy going to pay me? So now in these questions, we're kind of going back to this scenario up here in the front or on the top. Other than the wage. So what factors would influence whether you decide to go back and work for this guy? The first one I would say is the money. How much is it going to pay me? But that one's off the table because it says other than the wage. Okay, what other factors would influence you? Okay, well, things like, do you already currently have, how bad do you need the money? How bad do I need the money? So if you're wealthy and you have plenty of money, well, maybe you don't need to go back to work and work for this guy. So that's one thing. Do you already have a job? Do I have a job doing something else? Do I have a job? Right? So this is another factor is what's the opportunity cost? So my opportunity cost of working for one guy is I can't work for somebody else or for myself. And so what's the opportunity? If I work for this guy delivering milk, what's the money I could be making? And the other one might go back to this whole idea of fear. Is there a likelihood of getting sick? So I'm just going to write sick ? Am I likely of getting sick? Am I going to interact with a bunch of other people? This coronavirus, what does that look like? Right? These are just 3 factors. There's a dozen more you can come up with. These are all shifters of supply. These are all things that would affect your willingness to work. And they're actually, you just created the shifters of supply. Okay, number 9, according to the article, what are some companies doing to get more truck drivers, all right, to start working? More truck drivers. It says right here, the plant right here, running later, is offering a $1,000 signing bonus to drivers. There it is, $1,000 signing bonus. So $1,000 signing bonus to drivers. And then the question says, do you think it'll work? That one is up to you. So I leave it up to you to decide, do you think that's going to increase? And probably it does. $1,000 would motivate. So I would, maybe that's not as much of opinion as more kind of talking about incentives. So it's very likely the quantity supplied will increase for truck drivers because now at a higher wage, they're going to be like, okay, cool. Some guys at home be like, I'm not going to work. $1,000? Okay, sure. I'll go work. And that's exactly why they're doing it. They're trying to go get more of these workers out there. So that's what's happening. You get the idea. How you feel about that? You feel good? You good? Okay. So that's what we're talking about. Now, next one, this is totally more of an opinion. You're thinking about asking your boss for a $1,000 signing bonus, which is one of the reasons why you learn economics. Remember, you're learning economics. You read this article. You realize, oh, wait, let's go back to the scenario. Something weird is happening in the market. Now you understand by reading this article what's happening in the market. Now you understand, the situation. You realize this guy is desperate. Your former boss really needs you to come in, and here's the reason why. And you read this article, so you're thinking about asking your boss for a $1,000 signing bonus, but your little sister thinks that it would be taking advantage of him. So do you agree or disagree that your sister that you're taking advantage of this guy if you ask for a $1,000 bonus? That one I need your input, and since I need your input, it is now time to go to Zoom. So what we're going to do right now is I'm opening up a Zoom class. I want your answer to this, but I also want to do the second worksheet as well. So I'm going to make a new Zoom meeting for all of us to join. If you want to, you don't have to. Do me a favor though. Once you get in, turn off your audio so I don't hear my voice on there. It gets kind of weird when that's happening. So here we go. What we're gonna do is I'm making a Zoom really quickly for you guys. Here's the numbers. It's going to be 754825003, and the password is, it's weird, 1SOR. I'm not sure if this is case sensitive. FV. If this is capitals, why are you using S's? It look like 5s. That's weird. So do me a favor, jump on in. Horrible handwriting. I'm so sorry. I really am. I just type all day long. There's no reason forever for me. So again, the 754-825-003 is the invitation number. The password 1SOR. These are all capital. FV, those are not capital. Okay. So jump on in if you can. I'd love to get you in here and make sure we're working on this. And I can ask you that question. Again, the question here is this. Is it unfair or is it unjust or is it just plain not right to ask for that $1,000 bonus? I should be able to admit you guys. Thank you so much for jumping in. Everybody who's jumping in right now, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, now they're coming. Woo! So nice to see you. Okay. All right. So do me a favor as we populate this thing. It'll take probably maybe 5 minutes to get everybody in. Not 5 minutes. It'll take like 3 minutes. Seriously, this will be quick. This will be quick. Hey, there you are. How you doing? Okay, so do me a favor and turn off your audio for. Hey, nice to see you. Turn off your audio for my video, and so you're now here live with me on Zoom. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you guys up and running so I can see you on the screen. And then I'm going to ask you guys what you think. Remember, the question here I'm trying to get at is this idea of, so you can see yourself. There you are. Hey, how you doing? I'm going to unmute everybody. So everyone go ahead and say hi. Hello. Nice to see you. You guys are less excited than I am. I guess that's okay. That's okay. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you so much. All right. So first things first. I'd like to get your input. We can see you here on the screen, so you're unmuted. So go ahead and tell me, what do you think? I'm not going to call on anybody. The question one more time is, do you agree with your little sister that asking for that $1,000 signing bonus, it would be taking advantage of your former boss? What do you think? Just like the classroom sometimes. You ask a question, the student's like, I don't want to answer. Not me. Taking advantage. I hear a child playing in the corner. Anybody want to jump in? Anyone? Come on. You jumped in a Zoom meeting because you wanted to jump in. Let me know. What do you think?
Maybe a little bit because the boss is also earning less money. So he has less money to pay the employees.
That's a great point. I love it. That's a great point. Since he's hurting, you're not just taking advantage. The good argument would be you're not just looking at like regular times. This is kind of a pandemic. This is serious, tough times. So he might be hurting, and he's pouring all his milk down the drain. And so on top of that, you're asking for $1,000. It's maybe a little insensitive. Anybody else think that it's not a taking advantage?
But you also could be struggling financially, struggling to pay your bills in this crisis, and some people really need it, and I don't think asking $1,000 is taking advantage.
All right. That's a great point too. So it's not taking advantage because you could be hurting for money as well, right? And you're the one doing the work. So anybody else want to jump in?
It's not like he's like telling the guy, give me $1,000 or else. So I think that it's up to the guy whether or not he wants to give his employee $1,000.
I love it. That's a great answer. That's your classic economics answer is voluntary exchange. And that's how supply and demand work. Voluntary exchange. All you could do is ask. And that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. If you ask and the guy says no, you say, okay, fine. I was going to work for you anyways. Or not. Anybody else want to jump in there and make an argument for why it is taking advantage? I think we have two non-taking advantage, and I want to hear one more yes, it is taking advantage, and why? Nobody? That's okay. That's okay. It's an opinion question. You can write your answer whatever you want. If you want my opinion, which I'm sure you do, I do not think it is taking advantage simply because there is a cost associated with going to work right now. Let's be honest. There's a cost with going to work. You have to decide if it's worth your time and energy to potentially get sick right now, and that there's a cost. It's the same reason why people who work on, you've seen the show Greatest Catch or Deadliest Catch. The reason they actually get paid a whole lot because it's a dangerous thing. So it's kind of hazard pay that goes into some jobs, and so this would kind of be thought as kind of hazard pay to some extent, especially if you're trying to alleviate fear. Also, it depends. Asking for $1,000 maybe might be your opportunity cost. Be like, listen, I do this other job, but if you get me $1,000, then I'll do it. So I don't think it's taking advantage. Even as just asking for a wage is not taking advantage of somebody if that wage covers your opportunity cost. So I would agree with those people, but I do also at the same time understand that it would be pretty insensitive in a time right now to do that at the same time. So I get that. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna switch gears and we're gonna go do the second one right here. I need your input. So the guys, oh, someone was turning out. That was me. I need your input on this one for sure. The economics case studies, case study number 2. I'm gonna gun this one pretty quick, and so those of you, if you don't feel comfortable with your face on the screen, go ahead and take your face off. But I definitely want to get your guys' input because this is more of a engagement one, conversation one. And here we go. You're 20 years old. By the way, I wrote this before the coronavirus, so some of this stuff does not work right now, so we'll just go with it. All right, you're 20 years old and you've been cutting hair for 3 years. It started with your family, but eventually you had several clients a week come to your house. Now, this is a market that happens all the time, right? The hair market. Now you're attending out-of-state college and you want to get a job at a salon, but you don't have a barber's license. You're not sure if a barber license in one state is valid in a different state, and you want to know what other jobs require a license. During your search, you come across this article. There's an article that talks about occupational licensing, and that's the concept we're talking about. Occupational licensing, I'll just read this, is the legal requirement that a credential must be obtained in order to practice a profession. It is a common labor market regulation that exists to protect public health and safety. However, by limiting access to many occupations, licensing imposes substantial costs. Consumers pay higher prices, economic opportunity is reduced for unlicensed workers, and even those who successfully obtain licenses must pay upfront costs and face limited geographic mobility. What's that mean? I wonder. Well, let's answer some of these questions. Now, I'm taking you guys off the screen, and let's answer these, but I still can hear you. So jump on board. Here we go. 1 in 4 jobs in the U.S. require a license. Other than barbers, what are some jobs that require government approval? All right, let's name at least, 6 of these. So let's go. Ready, go.
Food services.
I heard food services?
Teachers.
Teachers for sure. So to be a teacher, you need...
Medical services.
Oh, yeah, medical. And that's all over the place. So you have to take tests. You got to go get, become a doctor. There's requirements there.
Lawyers.
Yeah, lawyers. Keep going.
Police.
I'm sorry?
Police and other public servants.
It's the first word that's messed me up. Police. Oh, police. Yes. Yeah, you need to go to a police academy. You need some sort of regulation. This list will keep going on because 1 in 4 jobs require a license. Let's just name one more so we have a full list.
Transportation.
So transportation? Yeah, so to be transportation. So to be like a bus driver for kids, you have to have some sort of regulation. You have to have some practice with that. These are all factors. These are all examples of occupational licensings. Why does the government require occupational licenses?
To protect the health and safety of consumers.
There you go. I'm just going to write an arrow because my handwriting sucks. Protect public health and safety. That's what they say it's for, and that seems like that would make sense, and it does make sense, but at the same time, there's other factors. In general, does requiring barbers to get a license result in higher wages or lower wages? What do you think?
Higher wages.
Yeah,
Higher.
higher wages. Why? So put that together and tell me why.
It avoids the saturation of that like workforce. For example, medical doctors, like
Yeah.
an example. If not everyone can become a medical doctor, therefore the field doesn't get saturated.
So that's yes. So put that. You're exactly right. 100%. Put that in supply and demand terms.
Decrease in supply.
You got it.
There's wages.
You're right. Exactly right. There's a decrease in supply because, like you said, you don't have everyone going out and being a doctor or a dentist, right? You can't just practice dentistry in your garage. But decreasing the supply, this decreases the number of qualified workers, and that would lead to higher wages. If we were to draw this out, forgive my horrible graph here, this would be a decrease in supply. Remember, that's a shift to the left, and that says there's higher wages. So the graph could explain what's going on. It's just supply. That's all that's going on here. Good. You find out that each state requires its own barber's license. How does this affect you, and why does it limit geographic mobility, like the article mentioned?
Your license could be invalid in another state.
So, keep going.
So, you won't have a license in another state? I mean,
Help me out. You're totally on the right page. I'm just trying to get finished off. How does this limit your geographic mobility, though?
that you're confined to your states.
That's
which
it.
You have a license.
You're stuck being in that one state. So if I want to, I have a job, I'm licensed as a barber in one state, and then I realize, I wanted to go move, or let's say for some reason this is something else that people really want in another state. I can turn around and go. Normally, you would think just go move to the other state. So if one state had a shortage of dentists or something like that, and they're paying outrageously high prices, it'd be really easy to turn around and go to another state. But in this case, if each state has their own licenses, it limits your geographic mobility. I'm not going to bother writing that one out, but you're exactly right. You get the idea. If licenses were not required, how would the free market determine which barbers are qualified? Now, I can change the word barbers to dentists or doctors or airline pilots or teachers or lawyers or police. I could do all these things with this. This is a libertarian kind of question. So the question is, how would the market determine who's qualified?
Quality of output.
Quality of output. If you get a bad haircut, if your hair looks like Thor from Ragnarok, then it turns out that you're not going to be getting any more business. So it's just supply and demand, right? So the free market, in theory, would find out who the good people are at this, who the bad people are at doing this, and it'd be very difficult to try to convince people to come to your hair salon if you give bad haircuts, because supply and demand determines all that stuff. Now, this is the true open free market attitude, libertarian attitude towards markets. It doesn't matter if it's barbers or lawyers or anything in between, or accountants or financial advisors. You don't need a financial advisor test, because a good financial advisor will get business. Bad financial advisors will not get business. But do you think barbers should be required to have a license? This is totally an opinion question. Do you think barbers? What do you guys think?
I say no, because I think the output will speak for itself.
Okay.
I mean, if you get a good or bad haircut.
Perfect. Anybody else?
I say yes, because an haircut is good, in which, even though it's open, so you could have people who do not have a license.
An industry standard, that's good. The other argument for why someone would say that barbers should require licenses is because barbers, especially in salons, do a lot more than just cutting hair. They color hair. They're using chemicals, and they could potentially hurt somebody if they had no idea what they're doing, putting chemicals in people's hairs, in their eyes and stuff like that. So there is maybe another side of that. There is, like I said, some sort of public health concern associated with it. Just a person who cuts your hair, though, might not actually need a license. They're not going to cut. Actually, sorry, story time. I get to tell a story. So this is true. I'm not making this up. So my wife in college, and this was in the 90s when it was cool to do this, had a ring on her eyebrow. So one of those eyebrows, a little loop right here on her eyebrow. And she's getting her hair cut, and the lady who's cutting her hair, she's combing it, and every once in a while she accidentally clips it, she hits it, and my wife was like, hey, excuse me, I've got this thing, this piercing, so you got to be please be careful. And the lady, she was like, oh no, I see it, no problem. And she's cutting her hair, and then she kind of clips it again. just kind of taps it, and she's like, oh, you touched it again. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, you'll be fine. A few seconds later, she does the same thing again, except this time she hooks it onto the comb, rips it straight out. And so my wife's sitting there, and the ring lands in her lap, right? And her face just starts bleeding because, it wasn't that bad, but she's got a little, tiny cut right here where it cut right through and she yanked her piercing out. And the lady, of course, is freaking out. My wife was like, what the crap? Not good. So that could be a good argument on why, at least understanding piercings and not to rip them out of people's heads would be a good example of why you need some sort of licensing. So that was a story. Sorry, I just got carried away. Okay, back to this.
I'm sorry, I have a question about this.
Yeah.
What about the quantity demanded? Would that not eventually determine who is a good barber and who is not? So if we allow everybody to give haircuts and maybe give everybody the license to become a doctor, then eventually we can see who is a good doctor and who is not. Because even though maybe we suffer for a certain fixed period of time, and maybe some people would die because they get bad service, but then eventually everybody will know who is the good provider of a quality service.
Yeah. So you have a good point. So what most economists believe is that you don't need government set occupational licensings because the market will do it on its own. So what you're saying, so in between the idea of what you said of, people just start being doctors and the market will figure out who the good doctors are and the bad doctors are. What happens in industries is they're self-regulated. So doctors will get together and say, okay, the government's not telling us to have a regulation on and have some sort of license, but we're still going to make one. And if you're a good doctor, then you should be getting this license with us and then we'll vouch for you. But it's not mandatory. It's not set by the government. A market would do this on its own, right? They'd create their own groups. Okay, this is part of the people who we say is good. Another thing that would happen is people would have, and I'm not saying this is a good idea. I'm just saying it's part of what happens. Let's use dentists, for example. You can go to the, licensed dentist who has, an industry license that they all agree to, not necessarily set by the government, and you know that you're going to get quality dental care. But if you're at a low price and you don't mind having, maybe not the best care, but you're okay paying a lower price, then you can turn around and go to the guy who does it out of his garage. Do you know what I'm saying? Is it unsanitary? That's the cost that you might decide to pay if you end up doing it. You're right. Maybe one people or two people, a lot of people might get sick with that situation. And then people will realize, well, we can't keep selling it out of our garage. We have to go rent out a building. But you get the idea that there'd be different kind of price points along the way. If I'm okay paying a lower price for somebody who's maybe, not has a certain license, I'm okay doing it. Right now, the government's saying you can't have that. And so that's why at least libertarians would argue, listen, let it run. People will create their own licensing system. It'll be industry created. And the people who aren't licensed, people can decide if they want to go to them or not. The question becomes tricky in other ones, and that's why I'm trying to get to this next one. Do you think airline pilots should be required to have a license? That's where things start getting tricky, right? If you found out there was a strike for airline pilots, you would be like, wait a second, we're just gonna put anyone up there, like somebody who only had 2 hours of flying time in a video game. What do you guys think? Airline pilots, should they be required to have a license?
Yes.
Yeah.
The risk is too great.
Definitely.
Okay, so
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, and that's one of the things that you do is when you talk about these things, and that's economics, it's all gray area, because I can keep going along these lines. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? If I'm not sure if any of you are libertarian or know any libertarians, but it's always great. This is more of an opinion question too. When I talk to libertarians and they say, okay, everything should be legal, right? Everything should be legal. Doesn't matter, drugs, prostitution, anything and everything. I always just like to keep asking them and keep going further down that scale until eventually go, well, yeah, those maybe shouldn't be legal. And then we can say, okay, there's some area government should step in. And a true libertarian will keep going all the way to the end. And that's a person who really, I say true libertarian, someone who's really bought into the idea people should be free to choose. And so you go, you start off with, should drugs be legal? Oh yeah, should all drugs, heroin should be legal? Yes. Should it be allowed to sell in stores? Yes. And they keep answering, okay, should prostitution be legal? Okay, yes. And then you just keep going down that line. And then you talk about weapons. Should weapons be legal? Yeah, all guns should be legal. Okay, how about grenades? Yeah, those should be legal. You should be able to buy them down at your local supermarket. Okay, how about, and then you keep getting like weapons of mass destruction. Should there be a market for missiles? Should missiles be allowed? Do you know what I'm saying? And as you keep doing this, usually you'll find out where they are. And then you'll find out that, a true libertarian says, yeah, no, the market will solve that problem. No company's going to sell missiles to somebody who's going to not use them properly because that's going to hurt their own company, right? And people aren't going to buy their product. So it's interesting, talking to libertarians because, and this is just a little opinion thing. I'm on a sidetrack here. Both liberals and conservatives, in the most part, want to use government for different purposes. And they're kind of funny because both of them, and don't take me wrong here, I'm not trying to put anybody down, but they're both a little bit kind of hypocrites. Like the liberals want to say, okay, the government shouldn't let you have guns, but the government should come in and do this stuff. And the conservatives go, well, the government shouldn't do, this, but it should prevent, abortions or something like that. Do you know what I'm saying? Libertarians are the only ones who are living purely on principle. The government should do nothing. Nothing. The government should never get involved in anything. And so they're just super consistent. Are they right? Are they wrong? I don't know. Let's jump back into this. How are jobs that don't require licenses affected by the increase in jobs that do require licenses? So here we go. The question is saying, if you have a market that don't require licenses, how is that affected by an increase in the jobs that do require licenses?
To put it in supply and demand terms, maybe the supply will increase because the people who are not able to get the license
can easily jump into those markets. And so for this one, it's actually interesting is when you place licenses on one market, what you end up with is people, because it's harder to get into that market to work that job, they turn around and can do the other job, which would increase the supply of these ones and lower the wages. I should just write that out. So wages tend to be even lower in jobs that don't require a license because they're so easy for people to jump straight into. So even if you're thinking like, well, my job doesn't require a license, so I don't really care about occupational licensing. Well, you actually still do care about it because that will drive in people into your market if other markets are closed off, which is kind of interesting. All right, number 9. You discover that Louisiana, which is true, requires florists to have an exam to get a license. Do you think more states should require florists to have a license? So again, what you can see I'm doing is I'm kind of pulling a kind of a spectrum. We agree, I think, for the most part, that airline pilots need a license. Some of us agree that barbers do. What do you think about florists?
I don't think so. I mean, it's not gonna. What's the risk behind someone who doesn't have a license?
Yeah, and that ultimately becomes. Yeah, and that becomes, usually the reason why we have licenses comes back to this idea of supply. So what you'll have is industries will go to the government and, some lobbyists will come in and say, okay, we want, to have a license, knowing that would decrease supply to increase those wages. So instead of having like a minimum wage just for florists, another way of achieving that goal to increase the wage of florists would be, okay, let's have some sort of license. Right? And so by having that license, it's an artificial way of keeping wages slightly higher so you can't just jump in. Now, maybe, and I don't know, maybe there's a florist out there who's like, no, there's a reason, and I don't know what that reason is, but my gut tells me that we probably don't need it, but I could be convinced otherwise. If you come back and say, actually, did you know, which is what economists do. In fact, I think it was President Truman would talk about he only wanted a one-handed economist because every economist he worked with would always say, well, on one hand, but on the other hand. And so, one of the things that economists do is they weigh benefits and costs. And so right now I go, yeah, florists shouldn't have a license. But if you were to bring me some evidence and say, well, what about these costs? And what about this factor? And what about that? And on the other hand, then I might say, yeah, okay, maybe they do. And maybe, if you told me other information about florists, about, maybe how much profit they make. The only problem, the reason why I don't like it, the first one is, number one, I don't see any health concerns about having florists being in malpractice issues. 1. 2, the other issue with florists is it's not something that we really need per se, too. So if it's something that we really need, then yeah, I could see having some sort of license, even if it's, not public health. But this is kind of a first world delight is to have flowers. as opposed to, something that's, we actually really need. Anyways, thank you so much for everybody who joined me on that Zoom. You guys are absolutely awesome. Let me put you back up. Thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to you. You guys have a good one. Thank you so much. Don't stop watching this video, though. But seriously, thank you so much for watching my videos. You guys are awesome. I'm going to do this every Friday. Next week, we're going to do macroeconomics, which will be analyzing the stimulus package and talking about, the practical application of fiscal and monetary policy, all these concepts that you learned in your economics class. If you like this stuff, if you like the case studies, tell your teacher about this. I have more case studies like this that I sell as part of this curriculum that I do, and it's what makes this channel possible in the first place. So do me a favor and tell your teacher about this stuff. If you're a teacher, please feel free to assign this to your students and have your students fill this out and make this assignment, but please don't use it in future years. This is part of a product I'm just making available to help people out. As always, my goal here is to help you learn and love economics. The next video I'm going to make is going to be next Monday. We'll be jumping into microeconomics Unit 3 if you're an AP or college student, and then I'll do macroeconomics Wednesday. If you didn't already see it, make sure to take a look at the calendar that tells you everything I'm doing. It's right here, and that can be downloaded in the description below. Like I said, thank you so much for watching my videos. It is a blast to work with you, and seriously, it makes my Friday awesome by sitting down and talking about economic concepts. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.